because they've been sold to their entire life, and a lot of the products just don't line up with what they've been told. I mean, anyone who goes into a McDonald's knows that what is on the screen is not what comes in that wrapper. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Yeah. And some of us might know it better than others, but so I'm just saying that, like,
but Chick-fil-A, you
get what's there. Yes. Praise God, because it's sanctified. Anyway.
Oh my gosh.
It's pretty blessed food.
Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. This is Taylor Schote with Tim Ware, the president of Advancement Coaching and Consulting. Today, we will be discussing practical insights for pastors and church leaders to advance your life, your work, and your ministry. Are you ready to advance?
We'd like to thank our sponsor today, the Destiny Center, and Pastor Scott and Tiffany Russell in Northwest Fort Worth, where they're making a difference in their surrounding community.
Well, guys, it's good to be back with you and with Josh Lewis here today on the Advancement Podcast. Tim, I'm excited about today's conversations and then the ones we're going to have throughout this podcast series. Looking forward to learning, even as a young guy, about social media. So it's good to be back.
It's exciting. We've got Josh on and to help us. We're going to do a 4-part series on social media and the church. And let me tell you guys a story. So I was working in a season in a church in here in Texas, and I'm a Gen Xer. I'm like the first year Gen X. So I am by far the old guy at the table today. And I'm feeling this pressure for social media, and so I'm trying to be cool. In the middle of a sermon, I was trying to make a point about change and reaching the lost and being relevant. And so I take my phone out. I normally wouldn't take it to the platform with me. I had it set up, so I was going to do this Facebook Live moment, trying to be cool. And I turn it around and I'm like this with it, and the Wi-Fi drops.
Nice.
In the middle of it, and I went
sad day,
and I threw my phone on the podium, and I said, I hate technology. Okay, first of all, it couldn't have been better. It was like perfect for my sermon, and they're cracking up, but it's just ingrained in my memory that I'm just not good at stuff. Every time I try to be cool with social media and with stuff, it's a flop.
Yeah.
So Taylor has helped me some. Marco, the producer genius, has helped me, but we have brought the expert.
No. That knows more than anyone at the table. Maybe I'll go with that.
Well, compared to me, it doesn't take much.
Yeah.
So so good to have you here to talk about this.
Here. Yeah, where do we want to start as far as the conversation when it comes to social media in the church?
Well, I think let's just ask the first question, because the reality is when we look across America, the majority of pastors are actually Gen Xers,
right,
and even still boomers. Mm-hmm. And we know that this is for millennials and Gen Z that's coming up behind us. This is what they grew up in. Mm-hmm. This is it's part of the culture, but it's not part of my culture naturally.
Yeah.
And so I think we all struggle with it. We struggle with what we should do, how we should do it. And, I guess maybe a good question to start with is for you guys to talk to my generation about the part and the importance of social media in today's culture, mm-hmm. both inside and outside the church. We can't ignore it. Mm-hmm. So talk to a guy like me. Why should we engage our churches in social media?
Yes. So social media, the term it's a broadly used term, right? So what is social media? Social media is a way for you to share ideas, thoughts, to collaborate with other individuals through networking online. Okay. So it's this opportunity where I can share my thoughts and my ideas. I can collaborate. I can get your thoughts and ideas on this given subject online. And it is social. One of the disconnects that I see with the Gen Xers, especially in the church community, is they use social media as another form of email. Right. So mass email. Hey, let's announce to the church all the things that we're doing.
I'm not sure I liked how easily it rolled into his laughter.
I love all of my pastor friends out there. I've freelanced with dozens and dozens of churches. I've worked with Daystar. I've worked with the Potter's House. So I've got experience working with social media and pastors for a long time. And just what I've perceived, I don't know if this is universally true, But we've used email as a way to tell people this is what's happening in our service. This is what's happening on Sunday. This is what's happening on Wednesday. And then we come over to a social media platform where people are used to hearing your ideas, your thoughts, what's going on in your life, and engaging with you on a personal level. And then you're using that platform to say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. And my generation has such a high.
You're 28 years.
I'm 28 years old. Yeah.
You're a almost past millennials.
I'm in that little
would be
gap.
called a cusper between millennial and Gen Z.
Yeah. So
oh my gosh, I really am getting old.
Yeah. So this.
Tim, we knew that.
That's messed up. He said we. He was talking about him in the audience. I've denied it. So this idea that we engage people, event. The audience looks at that and they have a high spam filter. Like my generation, if you have Google right now, you send an email, Google will actually figure out if this is an email you want in your inbox, or if this is a social email or a production email or a sales email. And it literally knows I don't want to read any of those other things, and it categorizes them for me. So my primary email box just gets the information I want. So churches go out there trying to sell to people, but they have such a high spam filter that they're like, I don't care what's going on in your Sunday morning service. I don't care what's going on Wednesday. Like, you're doing the same thing everybody's doing.
Right,
and I'm seeing 60 churches post their Sunday morning service. Why do I care about you? How is this any different than everybody else out there? So it would be the equivalent of an off-brand toothpaste trying to compete with a name brand toothpaste. I mean, name 3 toothpaste brands off the top of your head.
Colgate, Crest, and
you have a hard time.
Armor Hammer, something with
Aquafresh.
Yeah. If I asked you to name 5, it would have been almost impossible, right? But when you go to the store, there's like 18 different toothpaste brands, but we only know the 3 that have been the best marketed. So what happens is churches try to compete on the Colgate level of church marketing, right? They go out there and they say, oh, Gateway's doing this. How do I compete with Gateway? How do I compete with this mega church? How do I compete with, and they're trying to outmarket the biggest brand on the block, and they're not going to win trying to compete in that universe, in that field.
So,
those, when it comes to social media marketing, stop making it about your event and stop trying to compete with the leading guy in your industry because he has monopolized that industry. It's almost impossible. You have to break through in a new way.
Wow.
So
okay. I'm, as the old guy.
Okay.
You first of all, I felt like I was smacked with this, that we use it as another form of email. I'm not even up to my conversational level for our production back here, because I feel like I'm being embarrassed. But you say that it's social.
Yeah.
So the pushback is that is it true? So is it truly social, or is it a pseudo social? You know, when we look at part of what you read and when we think about studies, I was telling Taylor, we were on the phone this morning, and I was in a conference last week and some continuing education stuff, and they cited a 40-year study by the University of Michigan. For 40 years, they've been interviewing and studying their outgoing seniors, and one of the categories that they've been looking at is empathy. And they said empathy's been on a decline over the last 40 years, but since 2000, it jumped and it's taken a hard dump. And one of the things that they are finding is that social media is part of it, that it's a decline in empathy. Now, it could be this spam filter piece that we've gotten to a point where I will scroll past the bad, and we'll scroll past that stuff so we just can engage those other things. So help me understand a little more about when you use the word it's social, it's not email.
Sure.
So it's not just a branding thing. There is actually a relational component.
Social is being used for sales regularly. And that's what I mean to say is I think that people in that space that are going to it for social are coming out being marketed to. So if my son, he's 5 years old, he's my oldest boy, right? He will grow up for the rest of his life. I mean, he will watch cartoons, and on those cartoons, there will be kids playing with toys during the commercials. From his age to his adulthood, on every single screen he ever touches, the greatest marketers on the planet are trying to get him to buy something, right? So I think that has something to do with empathy. People are sitting on screens for hours and hours a day, hours and hours a week, hours and hours a month, so forth and so on. And people are trying to say, hey, I want to use you to get something out of you. And they're looking at that and they're going, man, this guy, I gave him my money and I didn't get out of it what I expected to get out of it. I gave this guy my time and I didn't get out of it what I expected to get out of it. And people have gotten so conservative and reserved and careful at buying the next thing that's around the corner, that buying in, owning that thing, because they've been sold to their entire life. And a lot of the products just don't line up with what they've been told. I mean, anyone who goes into a McDonald's knows that what is on the screen is not what comes in that wrapper. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Yeah. And some of us might know it better than others, but so I'm just saying that
but Chick-fil-A, you
get what's there. Yes. Praise God, because it's sanctified. Anyway.
Oh my gosh.
It's pre-blessed food. Neither here nor there.
Okay, so let me put this in a concise statement. What I think I hear you saying, and you guys, I want y'all to speak to this because y'all are that generation, but the antisocial component of social media is the targeted media, the targeted marketing.
Yeah.
So what was intended to be a relational platform is overrun with the marketing, has been overrun by the marketing component.
And that's why you see people running from Facebook to Instagram and from Instagram to Snapchat. Certainly it has a component of their parents are getting online and dominating that platform, and they're trying to run to another platform their parents aren't on. But
by the way, let me just make note, my generation was the MySpace generation.
That's right.
Which died in a horrible death.
Did you just say your generation died a horrible death? Because that's what I heard.
Online it did. Yeah, that's for sure.
They were mutilated.
I never had MySpace either. I wasn't even one of those guys.
Zanga,
MySpace. That name just triggered like a flashback. He just had, no.
What I think is so interesting in just even these first few moments here is realizing that social media has so many different thoughts on what it's supposed to be.
Sure.
And I don't even know, like I would love to sit down with Mark Zuckerberg and ask him, is Facebook today, because I would imagine Facebook is probably still the leading social media platform out there. At least it seems to be the most public.
Without a doubt.
Is it today what you thought it? We all know that it's for sure not what he originally started it for.
It's evolved and innovated.
It's evolved. But is it what you thought it would be? Did you see it today 10 years ago? I remember when Facebook first came out for us, my wife and I were talking about that and how different it is today. And the whole dynamic of our parents are on it now. And I loved how you said, and it's just another form of email. Mm-hmm. I was thinking it's an easier form of texting and not having to use a cell phone, right? They don't know how to use smartphones, so our parents can use a computer. And
that feels like a... It's true. It's true. I'm not denying it. It's just.
But I think the church and even the pastors, we're going to talk about this as we go throughout the series. We've got to wrestle with. So if social media is this broad, or at least there's expectations for it to be broad for different generations and different audiences, because the reality is that most of our churches have the young teenagers that are wanting to engage in some of these platforms, and you've got the techie older group that's saying, hey, we will respond to online, we will respond to social media, we're on there already. How do we engage our congregations and our audiences across the board? Like for me, that's what's so interesting already, is that we want to do the social engagement, right? Which I think is what you're saying at the core, social media needs to be, right? Because that's social media, or it's social, that aspect of engaging back and forth. But how do we also, for those who are going to it to look for marketing and those who are going to it to look for information, how do we engage that?
Yeah. So
part of me, I'll just tell you, part of me is there's a level of conviction, because because of the generation I come from, and even some of the early books written on it to leaders were, it was really this was a tool to get you to a place.
Mm-hmm.
It was a tool. You build your platform. You build these. It was not that. Greg Ford, I was at a conference earlier, and Pastor Greg Ford from Ohio, he was talking about reaching millennials, and he was telling pastors, he said, you have to engage in social media, but it doesn't mean you can't like it. You have to comment. You have to be present and active on that, which I'm gonna shift for a minute to say, if I can, that just sounds like taking so much of my time and energy, which I know that pastors are also saying that.
Yeah, and I know I said it before the show, and it's kind of a mantra: if you can't do it well, don't do it. And I would say that for sure applies to social media. So to this day, I don't have a Twitter account. I've tried, many years ago, but to post regularly and effectively on that platform, they recommend almost 15 posts a day. And I don't think in 140 characters. I'm obsessed with theology and influence and those kinds of things. You can't, tweet a doctrinal statement on the hypostatic union in 140 characters. Like, that's just not happening. So I've avoided some of those platforms because I don't do those platforms well. That being said, I think to both of what both of you are saying, the first thing that the churches have to stop doing is demonizing new, I don't know, say platforms, mediums by which we reach people. So you look at the early church. The first 500 years of the church, historians tell us that the Codex, what we now call the book, would have been almost 500-600 years late had the church not popularized it. The church actually made the book popular. Okay, they were the ones who promoted this thing. They look how effective it is to use this thing, and individuals caught wind of what the church was doing and said, hey, we should jump on board with this book thing, right? You look at the Renaissance, right? Science, entertainment, art, the architecture of these buildings was to communicate to the people the transcendent nature of God. Look how big and lofty and far away he is, and powerful and master of the universe, and look how superior he is. They were using art and architecture to communicate to the people, look what your God is like. And they were early adopters of the canvas that people were using.
That's good.
And you could say social media is not social, but you have to look at like the painting of the Last Supper and say, is that not social? Is it not something that we get around and look at and talk about the colors and how we feel and what we're talking? Like that's a social thing. And if we begin to engage social media, the online version of this social platform, and we were to look at it as a way by which we can connect to each other and talk about things, and we would be early adopters on these platforms, we could enter into a new phase of Renaissance, where the church is once again leading in communicating to people. But the thing is, Leonardo da Vinci was not a pastor, right? Like no one expected the artist to be the pastor. Sure. So take that pressure off of yourself. If you're the pastor, don't expect that everyone is looking to you to do all of this. This is not I understand that you've got 120 people at your church, on average, or it was even 80 members church is a national average, depending on where you're at.
Yes.
Yeah. So somewhere in there, I asked the church stat guy stats because, you can ask me social media questions. I'll ask you church stat questions. I'm not going to pretend like I know this. Okay. So, your average church is 80 members. So the pastor has this weight on them to say, oh man, I've got to do everything. I got to be the youth pastor. I've got to be the senior pastor. And now, I've got to make sure I do marketing in my church. Now there's this social media piece, and all of the weight of this is crashing down on me. Well, look, the church would commission individuals. The term Patreon, it's when there was an individual in the community that could do art, and they would, as patrons, pay them to construct these art pieces. So the church needs to be looking at people to empower, even if it's not financially, but to empower these individuals to express themselves in an art form that's glorifying to God for the benefit of the church.
Wow.
That's so good.
Sorry if there was a lot there.
and what's interesting, because my mind immediately thinks, there's different art forms.
Yeah.
Right. You have your paintings and you have your sculptures and you have music and you had different ways and avenues in which people contributed their gifting in the artistic way. And there's different platforms, and not just, I think when we talk about social media, it's really easy to think about the big three. Facebook, I say the big three. I'm 31, so the big three for me would be Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
For sure.
Twitter's kind of dying for a lot of people. We talked about that a little bit.
Thanks,
maybe
President
Trump. Maybe.
Wow. Wow.
Whether
Maybe
you love him or you hate him, nobody likes his tweets. It doesn't matter. Like
That's true.
That's a pretty safe statement to make.
That's true.
But you also have, like, our church is discussing right now having an app
Yeah.
and a website. What's the purpose between those two? Those, I would still say, are very social media platforms in a different form, but being able to utilize and understanding how you can best utilize all of that to glorify God.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, I love the idea, that whole idea of art and that interaction piece, and not demonizing new mediums. That's a huge. That's a huge statement. But
there are downsides to all of these things, and I don't think we should ignore those. There are clear, obvious, ramifications for social media in a negative way. But I think that as long as the church highlights those things, they'll never utilize what they're good for. So at the 50s to 70s, the rise of fundamentalism in America, we took our kids out of school, we took our Christian theology, our Christian music, our Christian entertainment, and we pulled away from the culture because they were attacking us. They were like, oh, science and take a prayer out of school, and we got offended.
And we pulled away, and now America is a post-Christian nation because of it. So historically speaking, I completely get it. One of the other things you kind of mentioned, and Taylor just bumped it a little bit, is the diversity of platforms. It sounds to me like you need to be selective. Which one fits you? Yeah. Don't do it if it doesn't fit you. Do the one that fits you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and not we're saying you, and probably a lot of, I know I did just then, and maybe our listeners are thinking you as the person, but part of what we're going to unpack in this series is the church, the local church itself as a, if I could say this, as an organization. How are we as a church, right? For a pastor or even someone on staff listening, how are we going to utilize social media for our church? The name for us, it would be the Bridge Community Church, because I think that's something we're going to get into. We're kind of calling you back to these another episodes here because there is a difference, I believe, in the church social media route that we need to discuss. Yeah. And as a pastor on staff or as a lead pastor, how do I use it both in a positive way for my church and in a way that glorifies God just by me as an individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, which is a great segue to. So we're going to be together for 4 episodes. And this has been a great dialogue. So we're coming to the end of our time. So next time, let's turn it, and we want to spend a couple of episodes really talking about that church component. Probably, for those of you who are watching or listening, in our next episode, let's take the time to really talk about the do's. Sure. Then we'll turn the page and talk about the don't do's. Sure. But what are the do's, the positives? Give us some guidelines for what we should be doing on social media, either as our congregations. Which platforms? How do we know what platform? How do we engage those things? And then the last one in this series is going to be where we turn to what do we do as individuals, as church leaders? How should we be engaging? Because I think there is still a component to that we need to dialogue with. So normally we ask for a takeaway.
Tim, today, as a good fine steak that's been aged. What is?
I just became beef.
What is your takeaway, Tim?
I took a ton of notes over here, but I really, one of the things that we've talked about from the very beginning is that we always want to be considering the eternal components in our advancement podcast, because advancing churches advance the kingdom, and advancing the kingdom means we're really looking towards eternity. And the truth is that it's very easy to demonize social media and not see it as a avenue for reaching people. And that's probably number one. And number two, seeing it as a place where people can have an artistic expression. I had never even thought of that, never considered that, but the reality is that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. So for me, I've got two big takeaways today. And I'm so wrapped up, I can't even think straight to pose a good question to our audience at this moment, because I'm just blown away by this conversation. So y'all have caught me at a place where I'm at a loss for words, and that doesn't happen very often.
I think a great question to wrap up would be for our listener right now, knowing that we're going to unpack some more of this, is just take a moment and think to yourself, what do you see your social media as today? We're going to talk about maybe what it should be in a couple moments here, but what do you see it as today, and have that as a backdrop, as a listening tool, going, man, I'm on course, or maybe I saw this as an extension of an email or an extension of a digital bulletin, and be willing.
Digital bulletin, that's relevant.
Be willing to make some adjustments there.
I mean, I'm just sitting here listening to this, thinking that I'm completely guilty, because I took the marketer's mindset. That's when, in the leadership books I read, when all this is coming, this is a place to do that, and I've really ignored some of the other. I mean, I go on social media, I read it because I want to know what other people are doing, so I know how to connect with them, but I'm not engaged, and so I am feeling convicted and embarrassed today. So thank you, Josh, for coming and for you guys are already teaching me something today.
Having another young guy at the table kind of loosened me up a little bit.
Yeah, okay. All right. So we'll see you guys next time on the Advancement Podcast, and as we continue our conversation on social media.
Thank you for joining us today on the Advancement Podcast. The show notes are available on our website at www.advancement.cc, along with other resources. Again, this is Taylor Schode on behalf of Tim Ware and the entire advancement team. We want you to remember that you are meant to advance.